Welcome to TV, Tennessee Valley Church. This week, my wife Carrie and I are here with Jensen, our grandson, at the Early Works Children's Museum in Huntsville. He loves this place. She does too. Today we're talking about family. I'm sure many of you are not part of a typical two-parent, 1.94 children family. Perhaps some of you are single, widowed, or divorced. No matter. We are all part of this conversation because with few exceptions, we all have some sort of family. So we're going to talk about family for 3 weeks here on TV Church. The Great Steamboat Race is an annual tradition that dates back to 1963. It takes place on the Wednesday before the Kentucky Derby in Louisville, Kentucky. It began as a race between the Belle of Louisville and Cincinnati's Delta Queen. Other steamboats have taken the place of the Delta Queen, but the Belle of Louisville still races steamboats up and down the Ohio River in the spring. Clovis Chappell, a minister from the 19th century, told the story of two such boats. They pulled out of Memphis onto the Mississippi River about the same time, both headed south. They hadn't been on the river long when the sailors began to talk trash, taunting and challenging each other. Soon a race was underway. The crew of one of the boats noticed the race was using up far more coal than they had planned for, so someone in desperation threw some of the ship's cargo into the firebox. The cargo burned as well as the coal did, so they fueled their boat with the merchandise and the materials they had been assigned to transport. They ended up winning the race, but they burned their cargo in the process. Life is a journey. Sometimes it feels like a race. Sadly, in our effort to get ahead of others, much like the crew of that steamboat, we may be sacrificing the most wonderful cargo in the world, our families. Some teenagers, so intent on fitting in and being cool, are breaking the hearts of their parents, those who love them most deeply. Some parents, in the attempt to be successful in their work, are giving up time with those who need us most, our children. Some grown-up sons and daughters are so wrapped up in our lives that we neglect the ones who sacrificed most for us, our aging parents. Some husbands and wives, in the attempt to get ahead in life and sometimes for the sake of a temporary thrill, are sacrificing that relationship that should mean the most to us, our marriages. In the 4th chapter of the Bible's book of Nehemiah, there's a great story about the rebuilding of Jerusalem. The holy city had been destroyed in 586 BC by the Babylonian invasion. The people of Jerusalem, those who survived the attack, were taken as captives to Babylon in present-day Iraq. It was a dark time in the history of Israel. 7 decades after the exile began, 7 decades, the people of Israel were allowed to return to their beloved homeland. Nehemiah had responsibility for leading the reconstruction of the city of Jerusalem, and they started with the wall. Now, there was a lot going on with the rebuilding of the wall. The city would be vulnerable without protection, so that wall was critical and the need was urgent. And to complicate things, 2 nasty old guys, Tobiah and Sanballat, local officials, ridiculed and disparaged the rebuilding of the wall, and they tried to disrupt it. When Tobiah and Sanballat realized, though, that the Israelites were ignoring their shenanigans and making good progress on the wall, Tobiah and Sanballat planned something even more sinister. They planned a violent attack. They threatened the death of the builders. It didn't look good for Nehemiah and to the people of Israel building the wall. They were frightened and tired, too tired and under-resourced to withstand an attack. Hear what Nehemiah did.
Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes." When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot, and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work.
With all that going on, Nehemiah said, fight for your families, fight for your homes. Now, today, with all that's going on around us, with our deep divisions and violence and economic uncertainty and international turmoil, with our private problems, the personal struggles that you're dealing with that only a few, if anyone, know about, the situation seems rather helpless sometimes. So here's what let's do. Let's fight for our families. Nothing is more important than the health of our families. Before there were temples and synagogues, before there were churches, before there were governments, there were families. God established the family right there in the Garden of Eden at the beginning of human history. God must have thought that His best means of sharing His love and His expectations with us, His best means of providing protection and health to us, is our families. I know we're angry at Russia's Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine. I sure am. But I also know there are lots of wonderful Russian people. I spent a couple of weeks there a few years ago and met some super folks. A lot of young Russians have turned to Jesus in the last few decades, even after so many years under the atheistic system of communism. Where did they hear the message of Jesus? For years, churches were closed and the public mention of God was prohibited. So where did they hear of Jesus? They heard in the privacy of their homes, sometimes from the babushkas, the grandmothers. In a country that for decades most people would have called godless, God was very much at work. In Russian homes, in families. I know many of us are concerned about the growing secularization of our culture and about the apparently growing hostility toward a Christian perspective. But God counters that through genuinely Christian families. And God doesn't give us families only for our spiritual health. God gives us families for our overall well-being, including our mental and emotional health. Listen. Psalm 107:41 reads, God sets the needy securely on high, away from affliction, and He makes His families like a flock. Proverbs 14:26 says, in the fear of the Lord one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. Proverbs 17:17 tells us, kinsfolks are born for times of trouble. And Psalm 68:6 says, God sets the lonely in families. In troubled days, we need our families, and these are troubled days. From bullying to body shaming, from the constant stress of our national division to the lingering anxiety, even depression from the pandemic, from the pressure of competition in school to the pressure of competition at work, life can get hard, and we need our families. We need our families like a sheep needs a flock, for refuge, for a haven. We need our families. In just a few minutes, I'll be back to talk about what it means to fight for your family.
Surely your goodness and loving kindness will follow me all my life. Surely your goodness and loving kindness will follow me all my life. You are my shepherd, I shall not want. your goodness and loving kindness will follow me all my life. When you are my shepherd, I shall not want. You are my shepherd, I shall not want. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. And you're a good father, you'll never leave me, you never forsake me, you never forsake me. And you're a good father, you'll never leave me, you never forsake me, you never forsake me. And you're a good father, and you'll never leave me, you never forsake me, you never forsake me. And you're a good father, and you'll never leave me, you never forsake me, you never forsake me. When you are my shepherd, I shall not want. When you are my shepherd, I shall not want.
Dr. Amanda Ragland is our guest on Tennessee Valley Church today. Dr. Ragland, you're the Executive Director of the Vine Pastoral Counseling Center here
That's
in
correct.
Huntsville.
Yes.
What all do you do there?
Well, I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and so I see people for counseling, individual, marital, family, and I'm like the administrative key person there, overseeing all the operations.
There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on.
Amanda, Travis today is talking about fighting for our family.
Mm-hmm.
Why is family important to us, in our family, of course, but as individuals?
So I'm also a Presbyterian minister, and for me, the most important thing that a family is like a little sanctuary, crucible area that God uses to form our faith. It's these people that we choose or that we're born into that God uses most profoundly to shape our personal walk with Christ. And it's the love. There's love in a family that's like none other. That's how it's supposed to be. But then there's humans in families, and so it's not always love. But the trials and the tribulations and the struggles and the conflict that is inevitable, those are all things that God uses in a profound way to shape us into a closer walk.
In today's society, what fights against that family commitment?
I think that the biggest thing is that we look to other places to get our identity. The family not only develops our faith, but it's in that place that we really get our core emotional support and health and our identity, who we are. And there's so many places in our culture that cry out in ways that we think are more profound to get our identity. That's our work and prestige and accomplishment and success. the whole greed and money and time and schedule, and you just get on this treadmill and you just go and go. And, you know, our culture wants our priorities to be really different than priorities. Sometimes it would nurture a connection with God and a walk with Christ. And so we get kind of confused that treadmill is more important, and that money is more important, that activity, that social engagement, that accomplishment at work. And at the end of the day, on your last day, it's not going to matter one bit. On your last day, your last minute, you're not going to wonder about that accomplishment you made at work.
What can we do to refocus on our families?
I think the first thing is making it a priority. And I think, you know, it's easy to say, yeah, my family is a priority. My family is a priority. They're the most important thing to me in the world. Where do you put your money? Where do you put your time? Where do you put your energy? Where do you put your leisure? And so it's like taking all of these areas and being willing to, I think, live self-sacrificially. I think that the people in your family are the people closest to you. And anytime I see someone willing to live self-sacrificially, to pour into a family, I think that's what it takes to make it work.
What's one thing we can do, if people can do this week to focus on their family or refocus on the family?
Consider the last time that you experienced God's presence together. And when is the last time as a family with your loved ones that you gave a shout out of praise to God for the blessings that He's poured into your life, or worshipped together, I guess? When is the last time that you acknowledged God's place in your life? And I guess just to stop and pause and love God together and give each other that big hug.
Thank you, Amanda.
You're welcome.
We need our families, but so many of our families are in trouble. So what does it mean to fight for your family? First, fight your schedule. A well-known Baptist preacher, Tony Campolo, is a popular writer and speaker. He told a story that has stuck with me. The story of his visit with a friend in the hospital after his friend's stroke. In order to make small talk, Tony talked about all the places he'd been to speak recently, and that, in fact, he had come to the hospital straight from the airport. Tony's friend from the hospital bed said to him out of love, "Tony, you go all over the world to people who 10 years from now won't remember your name, but you haven't left time for the people who really care about you." That simple sentence changed my life, Campolo said. I've decided not to let my time be used up by people to whom I make no difference, while I neglect those for whom I am irreplaceable. Now, I don't travel all over the world to speak and all that, never have. But for all my life, I've made decisions, choices, still do. And so do you. We're all the time deciding whether we will give our time and energy our families deserve to people, candidly, for whom we're not all that important. That doesn't mean we shirk responsibilities of our employment. Laziness is not cool. It's, of course, a balance. But most of us are going to have to fight against the assault of our schedules for the sake of our families. Second, fight your self-centeredness. Candidly, we tend to be rather self-centered. We seem to have a sense of entitlement that may be unprecedented in the history of our culture. That sense of entitlement doesn't serve families well. A me-oriented person makes for a very bad spouse and a bad parent and a bad son or daughter. Unfortunately, one reason so many of us don't prioritize our family is because we're so self-centered. William Raspberry wrote a few years ago in the Orlando Sentinel why the American family is in trouble. He said, "The key reason why the American family is in trouble is that too many American husbands and wives consider their families to be of secondary importance. Their number one priority is themselves, their personal growth, fulfillment, and all the other things we say when what we really mean is me first. Neither the economic nor the employment status of the parent is the key. What matters, he said, is whether the family is at the center of their concern. Wow, those are tough words. Fight your schedule, fight your self-centeredness, and fight your temptation to sacrifice your family on the altar of temporary thrills. Let me say that again. Fight your temptation to sacrifice your family on the altar of temporary thrills. Maybe we'll talk about that more next week under the topic of marriage, but let me note today, at least briefly, the need for husbands and wives not only to invest in your relationship, but to set up boundaries to protect your relationship. Establish boundaries such as the amount of time you'll spend and the places you'll go with someone of the opposite sex who's not your spouse. After all, you're human. That flirtation at work is innocent, you say. Nobody's going to get hurt, you say. It's no big deal, you say. That's wrong. You're playing with fire. It's just porn, you say. Nobody knows, and nobody's worse off for the pornography I see on the internet, you say. Well, that's wrong. Satan, the enemy, uses pornography like hackers use emails to gullible people. Gullible folks open the email and a virus rushes through cyberspace and corrupts their computer. In a similar way, pornography corrupts the mind and the heart, and if we're married, disgraces our spouses. Fight your temptation to sacrifice your family on the altar of temporary thrills. Fight for your family. Do you know of Mike Rowe, star of the show Dirty Jobs? His mother, Peggy Rowe, published her first book at the age of 80 and has become a best-selling author. The following story is from her first book, About My Mother. Peggy's mother, Thelma, decided to take up real estate when her daughters left home, and she was good at it. One of Thelma's strong suits was her willingness to candidly tell potential sellers that their house really needed a lot of work. One young couple asked Thelma to sell their house. After Thelma toured the house, she recognized it was going to be hard to sell. So she handed them a to-do list. You need to make these improvements before even putting your house on the market, she told them. The young husband and wife were grateful for Thelma's candid advice and told her that they would call when they had completed the list. Months passed. No call from the young couple. But then, finally, they did call. And Thelma came over. The house looked fabulous. I hardly recognize your home, she said. All the while she was thinking, I'm going to make a good commission on this house. We did everything you suggested, the young husband said proudly, and the wife added, in fact, we like it so much, we decided to stay. It's exactly what we were looking for. If your home, your family is not all you hoped for, don't leave. Make it better. With the exception of abuse, of course, don't leave. Work on your family. Fight for your family. You need them. They need you. As I read somewhere, the grass is not greener on the other side of the fence. It's greener where you water it. Fight for your family.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mounts I'm fixed upon it, mounts of God's unchanging love. thy grace now like a fetter. Bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above.
Thanks for joining with us today. If you're new to TV Church, my name is Aaron Jackson, and I'm the Minister of Music and Worship at First Baptist Huntsville. We'd like to invite you to one of our 2 worship services here at 600 Governors Drive. Our contemporary service is at 8:05 a.m. on Sunday, or here in the sanctuary at 10:30 a.m. We'd love for you to connect with others that join you in watching this program every week as well. The best way to make those connections would be for you to go to tvchurch.online. Once there, you can hit the Contact Us button on the left-hand side to start that process. This is also where you can begin to connect with our shared online community, submit prayer requests, watch more episodes, and find other helpful resources. Thanks again for joining us today. God bless you.